Hi there. So today we're going to start our read aloud Joshua Song. And Joshua Song is an example of historical fiction. And what that means is the setting, time and place, all of the information you hear about that will be based in fact, while the character's story is fictional. However, even though that the character wasn't somebody that actually existed, it's based off of somebody who could have lived that life. This is realistic to that time. So it's important that we watch both timelines throughout the story. There's the factual, historical timeline, and then there's the character timeline. So the setting is Boston in 1919, and let's read to find out what happens. First chapter is Job Jitters. The sound of creaking wagon wheels and clinking bottles broke through Joshua's dreams. Was it dawn already? The milkman's horse neighed softly in the alley beneath the window. Joshua yawned and stretched in the small brass bed. His room wasn't heated, and the January morning was cold. His mother was already clattering pans in the kitchen. Before the Spanish influenza struck the family several months ago, things had been different. Every morning, his mother used to sleep late while Annie, the housekeeper, brought coffee and toast up to his big bedroom. Dad would be shaving and humming in the bathroom. Joshua's morning had been full of his father singing, his mother's soft laughter when Dad teased her from sleep, and the smell of coffee. That was before that awful day, the day Joshua's father died. Just when it seemed that the whole family would recover, Josh's dad lost his fight. Mom didn't laugh anymore. Instead, she cried late at night and banged the pots and pans early in the morning. 2 weeks ago, Christmas had been a disaster. Just one long, dreary day of sadness and memories. Things were even worse now. Instead of heading back to school after the Christmas and New Year holiday, Joshua had to look for a job. We don't have much money, Josh, Mom had said. We have to tighten our belts and find ways to get along. I've had to let poor Annie go, and now you'll have to pitch in and find work. Joshua punched his pillow. Surely he would wake up from this nightmare, and everything would be the way that it used to be. But it was no dream. What about me, Joshua said out loud, hating the guttural sound of his voice. His dad was gone. He'd been dismissed from the boys' choir because his voice changed, and now he couldn't go to school. The rugby team had a good chance of winning the pennant, too. What else could go wrong? Joshua pushed his comforter away and sat up. He'd put off looking for a job all week. It was Friday, and he'd have to go job hunting today. The old gas lights had been sealed when the house was electrified 10 years ago. Joshua tugged the long strings attached to a bulb. The light glared in his eyes. He looked out the window at the dismal day. The milkman had deposited bottles of milk and cream on the back stoop, and the horse pulling the carriage was clomping down the cobblestone alley. Next door, the neighbor had opened his carriage house and was cranking up his brand new Model T Ford. Joshua washed quietly in the bathroom, and then he tiptoed back to his room to dress, careful not to wake Mrs. Froyer, who snored loudly down the hall in the room that used to be his. Pushing aside the knickers that hung neatly in the closet, Joshua grabbed his blue suit and tossed it on the bed. He didn't want to go to work. He didn't know the first thing about job hunting, but he had to go. After dressing, he brushed his blonde hair with some pomade, then headed to the kitchen. Good morning, Josh, his mother greeted him. She put a cup of coffee on the gas stove and then looked her son up and down. Good. You're wearing your best suit. It makes you look older. Do you think I can go back to school someday? Joshua asked. Mom turned her attention to a pot of bubbling oatmeal. I'm sorry. I can't afford to send you back to the academy this year. Even public school is out of the question. We really need money, Josh. Your father made some poor investments and, well, you don't need to worry about all the details. Once things settle down and we get all the rooms rented, maybe, she turned to switch on the stove and the burner flame went out with a loud pop. Maybe I'll even get the electric stove I've always wanted. Joshua recalled what Mr. Williams, the family lawyer, had told them right after Dad's death. His father had left only a small insurance policy and an even smaller bank account, along with a large outstanding debt. You finished 8th grade early and with high marks too, Mom continued. Your father had great hopes for you, Joshua. She looked sad as she spooned oatmeal into a bowl and sprinkled brown sugar over it. It will be hard to find decent work now that the war is over. You're only 13, and I don't want you working in a sweatshop. I'm going to Dad's bank to see if they need a messenger. No, Mom said quickly, not there. Can you try another bank or perhaps a department store? C. Crawford Hollage is a nice store. Of course, I wouldn't want anyone to see you there, but if you could work in the office. You don't want anyone to know I'm working, do you? It wasn't a question. It would be better that way. After all, we have our pride. Perhaps you could find work with one of the music publishers. They would probably remember from the Boston Boys Choir. No, Joshua snapped. I told you I'm finished with music. Mom shook her head and pulled the pot onto the side of the stove. Don't eat any more of the oatmeal, Joshua. Aunt Caroline always has a big breakfast. Mrs. Fryer is not my aunt, Joshua grumbled. Mom sat at the table. I told you, our neighbors would never tolerate a rooming house on their street. I don't want them to know that that we have a paying boarder. So, she is now Aunt Caroline. She's so cranky and mean. It's no wonder her family put her out. Hush! It's a shame when someone gets old to think their family doesn't want them. Mom whispered. Besides, they didn't put her out. They're paying a nice monthly fee for us to keep her here. She's got my bedroom, Joshua reminded her. He opened a bottle of cream and drizzled it on his oatmeal. Things have to be different now. Mom touched his shoulder. Be careful where you go today. Stay away from the tenements. And please, don't go to your father's bank. When Joshua finished the oatmeal, he pulled on his bulky overcoat. Mom handed him some coins. Take the L, Josh. Remember, you don't want just any job. She kissed him on the forehead. I'll worry if you're not back before dark. Joshua had only taken the elevated train twice by himself, and then he had gone directly to State Street to Dad's bank. He felt queasy. Mom was treating him as if all of a sudden he was grown up, like she was expecting him to find work and take Dad's place or something. It wasn't fair. Joshua headed out the front door. Nightshade Lane was awake now. A couple of automobiles rattled down the street, steering around a horse and carriage. Joshua remembered how excited and proud they were when Dad brought their new Peerless automobile. But the first thing Mom did after Dad died was to sell it to Mr. Williams. Since then, when it was too far to walk, they had to take a cab or the L. They lived in a nice neighborhood not far from downtown Boston, on a street of brick front houses with bay windows and wrought iron gates. How long would they be able to live there? Joshua wondered as he headed back to the elevated station to the next block. And where on earth would he ever find work? Joshua paid his fare and found a seat next to the window. Well-pressed patrons got on at his stop, but he noticed poorer people coming aboard as the train continued to town. There were men in overalls and women in faded coats. Even children carrying lunch pails were on their way to work. Joshua almost asked one boy where he was employed, thinking there might be a job for him in the same place. The boy's eyes seemed far away, though, and Joshua changed his mind, remembering what his father had told him. Don't talk to strangers in town. Some of them are from different worlds, Josh. The sun was shining brightly and streaming through the grimy windows. The train stopped again, and the sweet aroma of chocolate from the nearby candy factory drifted into the car. The slender gray custom house tower, piercing the skyline, caught Joshua's attention. Dad never did get to take him to the top of the tower like they had planned. Dad said the city was beautiful from up there, but Josh would never see it now. The warmth and the constant rattle of the train made Joshua sleepy, and he closed his eyes. His thoughts drifted back to Dad's funeral. The sweet smell of flowers and fresh earth of the new graves permeated the cemetery. There were many other families there weeping over graves too. Mom asked, Josh, won't you sing one hymn for us? A prayer to the Good Shepherd was your father's favorite. No, Joshua's voice rang out over the soft murmurs of relatives and friends. Don't ask me to sing. I can't. Not at Dad's funeral. Hey, boy, someone shook Joshua's arm. The man in the next seat. Wake up! Joshua woke with a start. Where are we? He asked. This is Atlantic Avenue. Joshua had missed his stop. He got off the L and looked around bewildered. The icy air smelled of sea and fish. Where was he? He blocked his eyes from the sun and saw the Custom House Tower. State Street must be nearby. Horses and carriages crowded the streets. The blaring honks of automobile horns added to the commotion. On the opposite sidewalk, a man with a brightly colored wheelbarrow called out, Fresh haddock and halibut. A newsboy who looked to be about 16 darted around the traffic. hollering out the headlines. His brown woolen knickers were held up by bright red suspenders. Plaid shirt tails hung below his open jacket. Strands of unruly carrot-colored hair had slipped out from underneath his soft gray cap. Joshua watched the boy in awe as he wove in and out between the cars and the carriages, yelling in a high-pitched voice, "Extra! Robbery in Revere!" He'd stop at each vehicle, slide the latest copy of the newspaper into the driver's window, and grab the coins with the same hand. Suddenly, the traffic unsnarled and started moving again. The newsboy hopped onto the sidewalk, bumping into Joshua. "Hey, you! Watch where you're going!" the boy exclaimed, scowling at Joshua. "Get out of my way!" Joshua struggled to retain his balance. "You bumped into me!" The newsboy stepped closer. "Don't argue with me, pipsqueak." "I wasn't arguing," Joshua snapped. "Get away from me." At this moment, two more boys, who also carried newspaper bags over their shoulders, appeared. One, a tall, skinny fellow, shook his finger at Joshua. "Don't you know you're asking for trouble?" he warned. "This is Charlestown Charlie himself." "Did you hear what Sean said?" The red-headed newsboy put his face close to Joshua's. So close, Joshua could almost count the freckles that dotted his nose. "Everyone in Boston, except you, knows it don't pay to argue with me," added, and Charlestown Charlie gave Joshua a shove that knocked him to the ground. And that's the end of chapter 1. So now what we're going to ask you to do is you can go into virtual Google Classroom, and there's a document in there. You'll find your name, and all we're asking is that you kind of share a little bit about something that may have surprised you, something that you had a question about, or just a comment. Then what you'll do is look and read what your classmates had to share and maybe respond to 2 of them. So we're really looking forward to what everybody thinks, and I believe Miss Wirtz will be back with chapter 2.